Yo, what is up guys? Today I wanted to talk about the guns that I think are A tier and above in Season 2 of Warzone. And I'm going to be giving you the best builds for these weapons. But the one thing to note is that we are going to be looking at these weapons in a vacuum. So the build that I'm going to be giving you for each weapon is the build that's going to work best in most situations. And the reason that this matters is because if you were going to pair an assault rifle with an SMG, you'd want that assault rifle to dominate long range. But if you're going to be pairing it with a sniper, you want something that's a lot more fast to handle so you can compete with those SMGs close range. And the way that I'm going to be structuring this list is going from the close range weapons to the mid range to the long range to the extreme long range like snipers and stuff. And starting off the list, we're going to be talking about the MAC-10. Now I know since Season 2 release, there's been a lot of changes to the gun stats for the attachments, and the way you're going to be wanting to build it is with the agency suppressor because it gives you that sound suppression, good bullet velocity, good damage range, and now it actually helps with that vertical recoil. So what I've noticed is that for the Cold War guns, you get that extra vertical recoil control in the agency suppressor now versus the longest barrels for the modern warfare weapons. And speaking of the barrels, we are going to be using the Task Force barrel here. Now it does add vertical and horizontal recoil, which before it didn't. However, even with that extra recoil, MAC-10 is pretty much laser beam. So you're not actually going to be noticing that too much. And you're definitely not going to be using this weapon at a range where controlling recoil is really that much of an issue. So we're going to be sticking with the Task Force barrel because it does give you the most damage range possible. It doesn't give you the most bullet velocity, but it's good enough. Again, this is going to be close range, so bullet velocity isn't a big deal. And then I'm going to be throwing on the Raider stock. Some people like to use the combat stock. However, with the Raider stock, you're moving faster all the time versus the combat stock, you're only moving faster when you shoot. Plus, you get the faster sprint to fire speed. And if you're going to be ADSing and flanking people a lot with this gun, this is the attachment you want to go to 100% of the time. The only reason you want to use the combat stock is because the extra firing movement speed actually might throw an enemy off when you're shooting because they're going to be tracking you at a certain speed, and all of a sudden when you start shooting you're just going to get a little extra boost, and that might throw some people off, but that's not a guarantee that it'll actually come into play into every fight, whereas the Raider stock's movement speed and sprint to fire speed will. And lastly, we're going to be throwing on the 53 round drum mag. The next close range weapon we're going to be talking about is the MP5. Now, it's not the talk of the town anymore, but it is still very viable. And if you're a person who likes to hip fire, I actually do recommend the MP5 a lot more. And what you're going to be wanting to throw on it is the monolithic integral suppressor, the 1 milliwatt laser to help with that hip fire spread. You could throw on the 5 milliwatt laser, but I feel like that gun is accurate enough and you're not going to have that visible laser that you would with the 5 milliwatt. Then you're going to be throwing on the FTAC collapsible stock. This is going to make the gun insanely fast, but you will notice the increased recoil. And that's the biggest difference between the MP5 and the MAC-10 in my opinion, is that you're going to be able to control the MAC-10 at farther distances. But like I said, this is a playstyle choice you have to make for yourself. Do you like to hip fire or do you like to ADS more with your SMGs? Then we're going to be throwing on the Merc 4 grip. This is going to help with that recoil control and again tighten up that hip fire accuracy. And I did forget to mention, but the FTAC collapsible stock also helps with that hip fire accuracy. And then lastly, we're going to be throwing on the 45 round mags because again, if you're going to be using this SMG to hip fire, you're definitely going to miss some shots just because of the RNG of it, so you want to have the most ammo possible. Now moving on from the SMG category, we're going to be talking about one of the most popular assault rifles in the game right now, and that is the FFAR. This gun has actually taken the place for the MAC-10 in a lot of people's loadouts because it is quick, it has a great time to kill, and you actually do get a little bit more range than you would with the MAC-10. And the way you're going to be wanting to run this is with the agency suppressor. This is a must. I like to run the 20.3 inch takedown barrel because again, this gun isn't built for long range. This is replacing your MAC-10 in your loadout. So if that's the case, I actually value the strafe speed a lot because you're going to be in close quarter situations where strafing matters so much. Then I'm going to be throwing on the Raider stock. You could also use the combat stock, but it's the same as we discussed for the MAC-10. The Raider stock overall comes into play a lot more than the combat stock does. Then we're going to be throwing on the field agent grip because this gun actually does have a little bit of a kick to it, especially if you're on console. And lastly, we're going to be throwing on the 50 round Stanag mag. And before we move on from the short range weapons, I wanted to give a quick shout out to the Kali sticks. Still my favorite melee weapon. Not only are they quick, but they give you the most range when meleeing. So if you're gonna pick one, I highly recommend the Kali sticks. Next, I wanted to talk about the GROZA. This is going to be our first gun that starts to dominate mid-range. Now, this weapon is actually very similar to the FFAR. The TTK is really close to the FFAR. However, the FFAR does beat it out by a little bit, but this weapon is a lot more controllable, so it is better suited for those more mid-range battles. And the way you're going to be wanting to run this one is with the cruise suppressor for all the benefits we talked about before: sound suppression, vertical recoil control, bullet velocity, and damage range. Then we're going to be throwing on the reinforced barrel to give us a little bit more bullet velocity and damage range. Then I like to throw on the Cobra red dot. Again, this weapon is for a little bit more range, and what helps with range? A scope, so you're able to actually track your targets at a distance. Then we're going to be throwing on the Spetsnaz speed grip. This is just going to give you horizontal recoil control and vertical recoil control. And lastly, we're going to be throwing on the 60 round drum mag. You could get a little spicy and throw on the 45 round drum mag as well if you want a little bit of a faster ADS speed, but this is Warzone and having some extra ammo never hurts. Then I wanted to give a shout out to the Ram 7. This gun still rips. It is pretty accurate and fast killing, and it will give you a lot more range than the FFAR or the GROZA. So if you're looking for that middle ground between a short range rifle and a long range rifle, the Ram 7 is the perfect fit. And the way I like to run it is with the monolithic suppressor, the FSS Ranger barrel, the Corp Combat Hollow sight, and I actually don't use the blue dot with this because this is a higher fire rate type of weapon. I like actually having the outer circle. Since I am going to have a lot of variance in my kick, this kind of just helps me stay on target a little bit more. Then I'm going to throw on the Commando foregrip and the 50 round mags. Then the last weapon in this category is the CR56 AMAX. It is considered by many to be the top dog when it comes to assault rifles, and this gun will definitely dominate anyone mid-range. You're going to be wanting to throw on the monolithic suppressor, the XRK Zodiac barrel, the VOK optic, and I actually prefer the T-Pose reticle. It's just a lot cleaner, and I see a lot of people running it also, so there is something to it. Then you want to throw on that Commando foregrip, which is going to help with the horizontal bounce, which is always huge for those long-range battles, and the 45 round mags, which is the biggest mag you have. However, one thing to note is that the CR56 AMAX kills in way less bullets than most other assault rifles out there, so you actually don't need that much ammo. And it doesn't have the fastest rate of fire, so you're also not going to be overkilling opponents too much. Now moving on to the long range category. Since season 2, we actually have two types of weapons here. The old meta, which is the fully automatic weapons, and the new meta, which is the tactical rifles, the AUG, and the M16. And if this was last season, I would definitely throw the DMR-14 and Type 63 in this conversation, but to be honest, I personally do not think they are A tier and above. For me, when it comes to B tier, which is another list I'll do because I do want to cover the off-meta builds, but to me, B tier are the guns that are extremely viable, but you will notice that you are at a disadvantage when you go up against any guns in the A tier. Moving on to the old meta first, we actually have a trio of weapons here. The first one on the list, and my favorite, is actually the AN94. I've made a separate video on this and you should go check it out if you want to see how it performs in game, and I do go a little bit more in depth than I will in this video, but the short of it is that the AN94 has a hyperburst, which means when you tap fire, you're actually shooting 2 bullets at once. So in those extreme long ranges, when you are tap firing, you're actually going to be hitting more shots sooner than you would with the other automatic rifles. It does have a little bit more recoil than the other two that we're going to talk about, but it is still extremely controllable. You actually won't notice it that much. And the way you're going to be wanting to run this is with the monolithic suppressor, the AN94 factory 438mm barrel, and we're going to be throwing on the VOK optic. Because again, if we are fighting long range, we definitely need to be able to see our targets and track them. Then we're going to be throwing on the Commando foregrip and the 60 round casket mags. This gun is awesome to use, it's quick to handle, and I highly recommend it if you're still in the market for a fully automatic rifle to use at long range. Then the next weapon is the more popular option. It has a little bit less recoil and puts out more damage at range than the AN94 if you don't take into account the hyperburst. So you really do have an option here. The way you're going to be wanting to build it is with the monolithic suppressor, the Archangel barrel, which by the way gives you the cleanest iron sights in the game. So a lot of people decide not to run it with an optic, but I don't use this gun for short range, so I definitely need the help of the extra zoom, so I throw on the VOK optic in my build. If you were not going to throw on the optic, I would probably go with the TAC laser, which will give you the aiming stability to help in those longer range engagements, but also ADS a lot faster. Then you're going to be wanting to throw on the Commando foregrip and the 60 round mags. The next weapon in this category is the Kilo. It is the weapon with the least amount of recoil. Although it did get nerfed, it is still extremely viable. And the way you're going to be wanting to run the Kilo is with the monolithic suppressor. Then we're going to be throwing on the Prowler barrel. Then we're going to be throwing on the VOK optic. Then as the other rifles, we're going to be throwing on the Commando foregrip and the 60 round mags. But now moving on to the category that dominates the long range in my opinion at the moment. These guns might get nerfed, just like the DMR-14 and the Type 63, but they're not as broken as they were, but definitely dominant in the current meta. And let's start out with the AUG. The way you're going to be wanting to run this is with the Agency Silencer. It gives you the sound suppression, vertical recoil control, which is huge when it comes to these burst weapons, bullet velocity, and damage range. For the barrel, you're going to be wanting to run the Strike Team barrel because it'll increase your fire rate, allowing these guns to actually be usable in these engagements. Then you're going to be wanting to throw on the Axial Arms 3x optic. Now, one thing I wanted to mention here is that for the reticle, you guys should try to use the precision reticle. Because this weapon is a precision weapon, then I recommend throwing on the Field Agent grip. This is going to really help with that recoil control and help control that burst. And then for ammunition, I recommend the 45 round drum mag. Then moving on to the M16, funny enough, you're going to be using the exact same attachments for all the same reasons. The Agency Silencer, the Strike Team barrel, the Axial Arms 3x optic, the Field Agent grip, and the 45 round drum mag. Both these guns are viable, but you guys let me know down in the comments, AUG or M16. Now let's talk about the extreme long range weapons. My favorite weapon of the bunch is the HDR, because not only is it pretty quick to handle if you build it correctly, it is also very consistent and reliable. You're not going to be having to adjust your aim and account for bullet drop as much as you would with other sniper rifles. And the way you're going to be wanting to build this is with the monolithic suppressor, the HDR Pro barrel, the TAC laser, and then the FTAC Stalker Scout, which is a stock which gives you the fastest ADS speed. Now, some people do like to run the FTAC Champion, which basically eliminates the idle sway, allowing you to not need to hold your breath when using this weapon, but I never actually run out of breath when I use this weapon, so it kind of feels like a wasted attachment, and the difference in ADS speed from the Champion to the Stalker Scout is very noticeable. So I would recommend the Stalker Scout, but the FTAC Champion is still very viable if you like that kind of playstyle. Then for the last perk, I like to use Sleight of Hand. You could use a bigger mag instead, but that does affect your ADS speed, and again, it is very noticeable. But with that said, if you guys want to throw on a scope, whether it be a thermal or a variable zoom, then I would recommend taking off Sleight of Hand and throwing on that optic. Definitely want to keep the TAC laser and the Stalker Scout if you're going to go with the bigger scope, because you're 100% going to need that extra ADS speed boost, because you will notice a very big slowdown when using an optic. The other weapon that I recommend in this category is the Kar 98. You're going to be wanting to throw on the monolithic suppressor, the SingGuard custom 27.6 inch barrel. However, if you want a quicker scoping weapon, you could get away with the 21.2 inch barrel, which means you'll have to adjust for bullet drop around the 150 to 200 meter range a little bit more than you would with the 27.6 inch, but it's not that much, and you will notice the difference in ADS speed. Then again, you're going to be wanting to throw on the TAC laser, the sniper scope. This is the one that everyone runs with the little triangle that you'll see if you ever pick one up. And lastly, you're going to want to run the FTAC Sport Comb stock, which gives you the fastest ADS speed. And those are all the weapons that I'm going to recommend today. There are a ton of more weapons that are very viable, but that's going to be a video for another day. So make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for that, and give the video a like if you've learned anything new today. But I want to know from you guys, what guns deserve to be on this list as top tier weapons, and which ones on my list don't. And with that said, I will see you again on the next one. Bye!